Hello, and welcome to Concordia Live. My name is Joe Milbank, one of Concordia's programming associates, and I'm so pleased to have you join us. A special thank you to our global patron member, UNICEF USA, for organizing today's important discussion. UNICEF USA is an independent, nonprofit, non-governmental organization and an integral part of UNICEF's global operation. Their mission is to relentlessly pursue an equitable world for every child. UNICEF USA helps increase UNICEF's global impact through fundraising, advocacy, and education in the United States. They collaborate with governments and corporations, nonprofit groups, and social enterprises, civic leaders, and a range of other organizations and individuals from myriad backgrounds. Despite being the least responsible for climate change, today's young people are most at risk from its impacts, an unfair inheritance that threatens their futures. The fear and worry that the climate crisis evokes is as real as its global impact, from floods to droughts to pollution. In today's Concordia Live, we will hear from youth advocates and other experts about eco-anxiety and how to tap into eco optimism through a powerful combination of advocacy, resilience building, green skill building, and youth voice, which can help turn despair into action and anxiety into momentum. Now, without further ado, I'm honored to introduce today's moderator, Anya Kamenetz. Anya speaks, writes, and thinks about generational justice and how children learn, grow, and thrive on a changing planet. She covered education as a journalist for many years, including for NPR, where she also co-created the podcast Life Kit Parenting in partnership with Sesame Workshop. Kamenetz is currently an advisor to the Aspen Institute and a co-generate fellow on new initiatives at the intersection of children and climate change. Anya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm so honored to be joining you and helping elevate the voices of our amazing panel, who we'll get to as soon as we can. This topic is so close to my heart as a mother, as a writer, and someone who thinks about how we are all living through such unprecedented times. You know, I think the Lancet study, planetary health study that came out in 2021, woke a lot of people up to the fact that there is this intersection between climate change, mental health, and emotions. So that study surveyed 10,000 people aged 16 to 25 years old in 10 countries and found really shocking numbers. More than half of them reported being sad, anxious, angry, powerless, helpless, and guilty about the climate crisis. 60% were very or extremely worried about the climate crisis, and more than 45% of respondents said their feelings about climate change negatively affected their daily life and functioning. These are really big numbers, but I think what's also really important to recognize is that tapping into our emotional lives, the things that move us as human beings, can be the most powerful force for change on the planet. I was listening to an award-winning adolescent psychiatrist on a podcast yesterday, Lisa D'Amour, and she was talking about the difference between mental health and negative emotions or psychological distress. And when we think about something like eco-anxiety, for example, clinicians ask, is this feeling appropriate to the situation? And is it motivating me? How am I coping with this feeling? So when we talk about eco-anxiety, it's very important to understand that your feelings are appropriate, right? This is a serious situation and it is not out of proportion. The question then becomes, how are we coping? What decisions are we making in response to what our nervous systems are telling us, which is that we are human living creatures on a planet that is living, and we are connected and our fates are tied up together. So without further ado, I'm going to go to our panel and ask you each to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and what or who motivated you to become involved in causes and movements that you care about, including climate change. I'll ask my namesake, Anya, to start.
Hello, my name is Anya. I am based in Michigan, and I am one of UNICEF USA's national youth representatives. I think how I started getting involved with climate advocacy was a lot about global health, actually. I've always been fascinated with the field of global health and learning about the myriad of factors that really contribute to the health of populations. And one factor that has really become a focus of public health in recent years has definitely been climate change because of the major implications it has on human health and really the domino effect it creates. I think learning more about climate change has really how it's uprooted the lives of millions caused me to get more involved with climate advocacy and learn more about how to get in about eco anxiety as well as eco optimism and how youth can really be the change makers and lead the fight for climate justice. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Sophia, do you want to go next?
Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Sophia Kianni, and I am a junior at Stanford studying science, technology, and society. And I'm an Iranian American climate activist and social entrepreneur. So I'm the founder and executive director of Climate Cardinals, which is an international youth-led nonprofit working to make climate education more accessible to people who don't speak English. And we do this through translating climate resources into over 100 different languages. And I was really inspired by my Iranian background and realizing that there was a lack of climate literature available in Farsi, which is Iran's native language, and realizing that climate change is the biggest issue facing our generation. And we really need as many people as possible involved from every region, regardless of the language that they speak.
Thank you so much for highlighting that global dimension. Kripa?
Yeah, my name is Kripa. I'm a current high school senior in Texas and a rising college freshman in Georgia in the fall. And I'm a UNICEF USA National Youth Council member and the UNICEF Club president at my school. And what really inspired me was my parents' childhood experiences with poverty, lack of quality healthcare, and just unhealthy levels of pollution. My parents and grandparents grew up in India in an area where heat waves, air pollution, and water pollution were some of the most prevalent issues. And just after visiting their hometown, I recognized the dire need for action towards climate change and saw the effect that drastic amounts of climate change could have on an individual. And then additionally, having to go through the COVID pandemic virtually, I had a close friend and family member undergo mental health and self-harm struggles. So ever since then, I've also become a really big mental health advocate and organized events to kind of destigmatize that area. And I think just these two diverse experiences brought together arose my activism for eco-anxiety and climate change. And personally, I just believe that every child should have the opportunity and the ability to grow up in a safe and healthy environment, one that's just not threatened by the negative implications that climate change has. And that sparked my interest in UNICEF USA, as well as the Red Cross International Humanitarian Law Team, where I now work to mitigate the effects of climate change on the lives of youth in general, but also youth mental health and well-being.
That is so inspiring to hear about. Thank you so much. We are having this conversation in the context of Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's really important to bring attention to this overlap. And as I mentioned in my outset, there's a difference between negative emotions or distress and actually anxiety that can affect your daily life and negatively impact your mental well-being. But it's also really important to think about how anxiety can be transformed into action and positive hope for the future. There's a great definition of hope that is sort of like the combination of agency and the ability to plan. So if you think that you can do something to make a situation better and you have ideas for actions to take to make a situation better, that really is the active form of hope. And so I'm curious to hear from each of you how you all have been able to translate maybe some of your anxiety about the climate crisis, about other factors affecting your life, into optimism, and what gives you a pathway to those more optimistic moments.
Yeah, I'm happy to maybe start because I think so much about the fact that for me, when I first started this work, when I was a teenager, I was so overwhelmed by climate anxiety because I felt like, okay, well, I can't even vote. And that seems to be the biggest way that I can make an impact. And I know the biggest thing that was a big differentiator was the ability to work with my friends and my community on coming up with solutions. So I started Climate Cardinals with just like a few of my friends, other fellow like teenagers and high school students from different high schools around the country, and now has grown into this global movement. And so I would say finding strength in community has been a huge thing for me, where even when I feel overwhelmed, I am always so filled with optimism when I call my directors who are all over the world, and I feel really defeated, and they're like, oh my God, no, like we have an idea for a new campaign, or like here's another thing that we can do to raise awareness. And so I think like leaning into that, leaning into friendship, into community, into family is such a great way to find strength, inspiration, and hope, and to really mitigate these feelings of climate anxiety. Because whenever I feel that way, I'm like, okay, how can I feel that way when I talk to Hikaru and talk to Kennedy and like my awesome directors, and they're so full of passion, where I'm like, Gen Z is going to save the world.
Thank you so much. Kripa or Anya, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd love to follow up on that. A lot of my eco-anxiety stems from the news and social media, and I think that's the case for a lot of Gen Z youth nowadays. But just hearing about the changing climate definitely has caused me, my family, and my close friends a lot of eco-anxiety. It's definitely caused hopelessness and constant worry about what our fate could be in the next few years. Thinking of like different questions like, will there be a pollutant-free Earth like for future generations, or how can we take steps forward to fix this? And I think that second question is really my pathway to eco-optimism. The way I find eco-optimism is just treating every small win as a major victory. So, for example, if like carbon emissions are on a downwards trend, even if it's a little bit, that's just something to celebrate about. If the ozone layer is on its way to recovery, that's something to celebrate about. But even on a smaller scale, if one of my classmates throws an old math worksheet in the recycling bin, that's personally something to celebrate about. And just these small celebrations lead to an even bigger one, that being when climate change is not taking a drastic toll on the well-being of youth and others. And these small and big celebrations just really help me maintain my eco-optimism in times of eco-anxiety. And these celebrations are often followed by action by youth, which stimulates eco-optimism for me even further. But I'll pass it off to Anya.
Thanks, Kripa. Yeah, so feeding off of you, so when it comes to global health, I recently learned that about the uptake of respiratory issues such as asthma and how it's correlated directly with climate change and pollution as well. Also, looking at the cardiovascular incidents, which have increased in Europe as a result of heat waves, was really shocking to me, and that kind of felt that eco anxiety that was kind of instilling in me. And I also remember in middle school learning about how in 2050 we are on track to have some 9.7 billion people on our planet, and at the same time, food and water will be very scarce. So this really worried me. And I think coming from a home that tries to be as sustainable as possible, like having LED lights, using less plastic, being more mindful of our actions, I really want to learn how I could do more as a young person. And I think channeling that fear and that anxiety and that other negative energy into action was something that really gives me optimism, and it really gives me hope about the future. Also seeing young change makers such as Sophia on this panel today, and people such as Greta Thunberg, they've always been such an inspiration to me, and it's really been such a powerful they've been powerful people to kind of look up to and kind of have that guiding light to show, wow, our generation does care and we can still make that change, and that change starts with us right now. So that gives me a lot of eco optimism.
Thank you so much. I love these points about feeling connected to your collaborators, finding the small wins and celebrating those, because we really do have a lot of control over the scope that we choose to think about and operate at, and then looking at those heroes that really inspire you. All of you really inspire me, and I am constantly amazed by the energy and the focus of the young leaders that I meet, but also reminding myself and reminding older people who may be watching that it's not just the responsibility of your generation to solve this problem. So what do you want adults to be doing to attack the climate crisis? And how have you personally pushed leaders and decision makers to act on climate change, whether at the level of your school, your city, or the globe? And I'll ask Anya to start so we can go back in the same order.
Yes, sure. So there's this one quote that I think about very often from time to time, We do not inherit Earth from our ancestors, rather we borrow it from our children. And I think this quote is such a powerful quote that shows us that we really do need to take responsibility and accountability for our actions. And also looking at how adults can be more responsible as well. Also looking at people in positions of power and the changes they can make as well. So I think adults do really have the ability to use sustainable materials, really educate themselves, be more mindful of their carbon footprint as well. And they also do have the ability to advocate and inform their peers. And for example, how to consume less plastic, or even how to use less energy within their own homes. And I think kind of informing adults and showing them that it is important. It's not only important for you, but it's also important for your children and for future generations. It's really about that mindfulness, in my opinion. And I think answering the second part of your question, how have I personally pushed leaders in my community? Well, I've also been a part of the National Council of Project Green Schools last year. So that's an organization that's dedicated to mobilizing youth and kind of mobilizing them to make a change in the communities, to make them more green, educate their peers and K through 12 students on steps they can take to be a more responsible and environmentally sustainable person. And I think serving on this council was amazing because I was able to work with other youth change makers who are just as driven as I am to make a change in climate and kind of achieve climate justice. So I've worked with other people, and more recently, however, during Martin Luther King Day this past January, I worked with my superintendent to execute a project where we planted about 2,000 seeds in our community. And although this might seem not very big in the grand scheme of things, I think these 2,000 seeds were very, very important for making our community greener and kind of raising awareness on how we as a community can be more sustainable and be more mindful of our carbon footprint and things we can do to help our environment.
Thank you so much. I have a memory of a tree that I planted in high school that grew and flourished in a certain part of the street, and that I would drive by all the time. And it was so exciting to see, because it really is something that you see grow over time, right? Sophia, what are your thoughts? What do you think the older folks need to be doing?
Well, I would say that from the perspective of climate, a huge thing definitely is we just need better elected officials. We need people who are committed to climate justice and passing progressive climate legislation. And to that end, I would say also like really having good conversations with family members and older adults, and making sure that they're also voting and being involved in these political processes has been something that I've worked a lot on, just to push for system change. But then also like on a high level, like really pushing for investment in renewable energy and green jobs. So to the extent that also there can be a component of like intergenerational collaboration and mentorship, I think is really important towards steering young people towards green careers, green opportunities. That to me has all been really great. Like I served on the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on climate change, and that was a really incredible opportunity to be able to engage with in dialogue with high level decision makers, and to be able to clearly communicate like my own priorities and my own fears, as well as to open space for other young people to have the opportunity to communicate at a high level what their key priorities and fears were. So I think just really making space and opening opportunities for young people to be able to demonstrate their enthusiasm and aptitude for action.
Yeah, and then I'll follow that up. So I think young people can push leaders by kind of like doing three main things. The first one, just raising awareness about climate change issues. A lot of elected officials, that might not be their highest priority. So just pushing for that, advocating for policy changes, and just engaging in meaningful dialogue with policymakers. This can take the form of just taking advantage of social media, like I mentioned before, and just spreading the vast impact of diverse interests that people have, and just mobilizing support for action on that front. And this specifically could lead to the creation of more climate action groups like the one Sophia has, or student clubs that address climate change, just allowing other youth to amplify their voices and kind of demand action from leaders. And these organizations can also lead to advocating for different policy changes. This could include writing emails, to speaking in person with Congresspeople, and just seeing a large portion of constituents caring about stronger climate policies can allow elected officials more need to act on that as well. And some of these actions could just include like increasing renewable energy investments or just prioritizing different sustainable practices, reducing any type of pollution and runoff, especially from large industrial companies. And I've advocated for this a lot through my work in high school. One of them through UNICEF, I've organized different community-wide events with over 200 youth in attendance, just raising awareness about the climate crisis and the clean water shortage in numerous developing nations. And UNICEF has an event called the Water Walk, which depicts the conditions of clean water retrieval. With our club does it with different obstacle courses, physical challenges, and different like salt and sugar water shots just to show the lack of clean water. And also through like the creation of infographics and posters. And then another example that I was given the opportunity to do as part of the National Youth Council in March was speak to congressional representatives on Capitol Hill on behalf of UNICEF USA, just to urge and talk about the urgency of the topic of climate change and how this is affecting the well-being of so many youth worldwide. And just being in person, I've seen the increase in interest in Congresspeople and staff when youth are the ones speaking about the issues that they're passionate about. So I've taken this back to my home and my school and just encouraged activism among my peers and family and friends as well, just to expand that potential reach.
I just want to amplify what you said, because I've been constantly amazed at the power that youth have when they truly are activated on an issue like climate change and mental health for that matter. But there's something where there is a unique moral authority that you're speaking from. The sense of urgency is undeniable. And I really believe that we've seen the impact and how it's changed the conversation over the last 5 or 6 years. So very impressive. I can also say as a segue that, there may be younger people watching this who think, gosh, these people, they're sitting on commissions, they're organizing protests, they have the ear of people, they're collaborating all over the world. How do I do that? And, the world's most pressing problems are so, so big. So what is one small thing that you would say to a young person who wants to take an action that could lead to having a greater impact on the road? And I'll ask you, Sophia, to start.
I love this question because I love to always tell people that what I did is completely within the realm of what any young person can do, because Climate Cardinals really was able to only start because of TikTok, because we use TikTok to get the word out to thousands of young people who then signed up to volunteer with us. And now any young person can sit in their bedroom, in their childhood bedroom, the way that I did, and use social media to leverage that momentum to get people to take action. And to that effect, also, I would say, reach out to people who inspire you. I want to go and find how unbelievably cringy and motivated I was to work with people, because it's literally dozens and dozens of DMs of me DMing all these climate activists who I thought were really incredible, being like, oh my God, I'm so inspired by you. Can I work with you? How can I get involved and contribute? And I really encourage people to do the same thing, especially for people in your area and your community. So if there's somebody who is leading an organization who inspires you, if there's someone who's working with the school club that you're really interested in, just reach out, ask them, how can I help you? I really love your work. And I think that is really the way that I would encourage other young people to get involved, is look at your area, find someone doing something really dope and ask, how can I get involved? How can I add value? How can I contribute? Because obviously, I think I started this when I started doing this work when I was 12. I'm 21 now. And so it's things like this don't happen overnight, but taking that first step, getting involved, reaching out to the right person. After a few years, there's no reason why somebody watching this can't be in my position talking to other young people.
I love that. Don't be afraid to get cringy and get into their DMs. This is such great advice. Kripa?
Yeah, so kind of in addition to what Sophia said, I think that's some really great advice. But another thing could just include just educating yourself about climate change. A lot of people don't know a lot of the aspects, and even I don't know all of climate change and everything that goes into that. So just researching current problems, maybe like possible solutions and potential courses of actions can allow for a deeper understanding as well. And I think educating yourself is kind of a step forward in educating others. So taking a few minutes just every day to like watch the news or stay up to date with the climate crisis in any way can just serve invaluable when raising awareness or creating your own climate organizations or even speaking to legislators. And I think this knowledge that any youth or any person can gain will provide a really big like upper hand in conversations about these issues, as people listening will respect you more if you have more knowledge about the topic and have potential courses of actions planned out, so that your audience is able to kind of figure out where they can start working as well, especially since youth are often overlooked, especially those who don't have the right to vote yet. So just gaining knowledge about this and inspiring others to join the cause, raise awareness, and have an impact would be another step forward in what youth can do to kind of step into the climate crisis and maybe take a step forward to solving it. But yeah.
I love that. Always important to stay informed. Anya?
Yeah, sure. Similar to Kripa, one of the main things I think that are really important and powerful is educating yourself and being informed of about climate change and the different anthropogenic factors that are driving climate change, and also learning how to take action as well. I think, at least for me, I see that there are opportunities everywhere. There are so many different ways to get involved, and there's always different organizations that look for volunteers. And honestly, I feel like the biggest thing is getting rid of that mental block. I know when a couple years ago, I was always worried. I'm like, oh, maybe reaching out to this person will look weird, or oh, I'm too young. But honestly, I feel like if you want to take action, the best time is always now. I know a lot of times I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed out on this opportunity, but really, I still can do it now. And I think what Sophia mentioned before about being afraid of being cringy, right? I totally relate to that. And I'd always be scared of reaching out to people I thought were really awesome. I just wouldn't, because I'm like, oh, I'd look weird or something like that. So I think it definitely is important to kind of just go for it, kind of reach out. There's opportunities everywhere. Just get connected and yeah, just stay informed. I think that would be my biggest advice to someone who does want to take action.
I love that. And I think what's interesting is that you're kind of talking about the little flutters of anxiety, right? The low grade anxiety that comes to us when we're trying to do something a little bit challenging, and then overcoming that will allow us to overcome our bigger picture eco anxiety about the world. So there's a great positive chain reaction that you're talking about. So in closing out our panel, I want to hear, let's dream big. You know, we're so often our minds go to the negative, but we would love to hear from each panelist what we hope to see in the next 10, 20, 50 years with regards to both the climate crisis and youth mental health more broadly. And I'm really inspired by this question. I think that we need to spend a lot more energy thinking about the good and the best that could possibly happen. So Kripa, I'll ask you to start.
Yeah. In regards to the climate crisis, I really hope to see a lot more widespread use of sustainable practices, as I mentioned before, at the individual, community, and the industrial levels. And this could include like consumption, efficient waste management, conservation efforts for like different biodiversity habitats and ecosystems, just minimizing the loss of diversity and just promoting sustainable agriculture as well. And something else regarding climate change is seeing increased global action as a result of different like technological advancements that may come with it in clean energy and different energy storage systems. And this could allow for like a long-term reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that may come to fruition as well. And then transitioning into mental health, I hope to see a lot of reduced stigma around it and increased support systems, especially in schools and different healthcare facilities. And then just an increased access to mental health resources and services in the same locations, and an integration of mental health into insurance policies as well as healthcare systems as well. And then in addition to that, just more holistic approaches, focusing just not on treatment of mental health after it's already been diagnosed, but prevention and just the overall well-being of the individual before like mental health struggles even like develop. And this can just be done by any youth, like promoting healthy lifestyles, different stress reduction techniques. I know we do that in our student government, and just fostering supportive environments for youth like all around. And there's a couple of Next Generation Nation, like 2120 goals. I'm not sure if you've heard of those, but they're goals that the Next Generation Nations organization believe can be solved within the next 100 years. And some of these that can be kind of like a guiding light to kind of address the climate change and youth mental health issues are access to clean water and sanitation, access to clean energy. And then there's three that kind of go together, like heal the land, air, and ocean. And then the last one, and I think it's the most important, is to engage and empower youth in community development, which is kind of what we're doing now. So I think this is definitely one step forward in the right direction. And I think all of these goals will just provide us all with a starting point on where to specifically take action regarding the climate change and mental health crisis.
Wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I think I love this question because it really speaks to this entire idea in my view of intersectionality of the climate crisis touches so many other aspects of our society. When you talk about climate, you also need to talk about gender. 80% of the people that are displaced by climate change are women, for example, or like environmental racism. The climate change disproportionately impacts marginalized communities, low-income communities, and people of color. And when we're talking about that, it's also something that intersects with the idea of mental health, of course, too, and giving young people and resources, and also understanding like mental health is an entire issue in and of itself that also in a lot of situations requires professional support and help. And for example, like Climate Cardinals actually partnered with there's a organization called the Climate Mental Health Network, and we did translations of their resources so that more people could access them. And I would definitely say, again, like just really harboring back to the idea of like making sure that you do things with people who you love and trust. And so you always feel like you have a trusted shoulder to speak to. And I definitely think also that's the role that adults can play. Like there really is no intermediary for there's no supplement for an adult that is able to provide like real tangible support for a young person, especially when you consider, I mean, I'm a full-time college student, like that is my job, you know what I mean? Like I do Climate Cardinals, I do my advocacy all on the side in my free time because it's an issue that I really care about. And I think that's also something to be very cognizant of, especially for any other young person. I would just say like be mindful of the fact that you don't need to have unrealistic expectations for yourself or to be too hard on yourself. Do what you can and be proud of yourself for the impact you're producing, and don't put an undue burden on yourself or just be too hard on yourself when you make mistakes or if you feel like you're not doing enough, because just doing something is already more than people can expect from a student.
Awesome message. I love that. Anya, do you want to close us out?
Yes, that was incredibly powerful, Sophia and Kripa. Thank you for your insight. But I think another thing I would hope to see is that people in power and legislators specifically see the impacts of climate change on humanity and on their constituents. Another thing is changing the narrative. I think if you search up climate change, the main picture that comes up is a polar bear. And yes, polar bears are definitely being impacted by climate change for sure. Their homes are being disrupted, but humans are also being impacted as well. There are countless climate refugees. There are so many people who have been displaced by the climate crisis. I think it's so important that people see this as well, because there's a whole different side of the story that a lot of people aren't aware of. It's not just the polar bears, it's humans, it's biodiversity in general. There's so much at risk here. And I just hope that people see these impacts more clearly and we can raise more awareness as well. I also hope to keep seeing increases in youth participation. So last year, I had the incredible opportunity of being part of the 5th cohort of the United Nations Global Youth Solutions Program, part of their Sustainable Development Goals program as well. And I think being a part of this cohort was so incredible because I was able to see the countless nonprofits around the world who had been fighting for climate advocacy and climate justice. And I think seeing these young people get involved, it was absolutely amazing. And they really took the opportunity to take their nonprofit and make it big. So I hope to see more youth participation, such as those that I met during this cohort. And I really just hope we can kind of keep taking steps and keep fighting and not lose hope as well. And I think kind of shifting the topic to mental health more broadly, I think destigmatizing the subject is one of the most important steps we can take as society, and making sure that we can have these mental health resources accessible to anyone and everyone who is struggling is very important to making sure that they receive the help that they deserve.
Wonderful. What a beautiful, humane, unifying vision. One thing I can say for sure that makes me optimistic about 10, 20 years from now is that leaders like you will be in charge with all of the consciousness and all of the work and conscientiousness that you put in over these years. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us for this webinar. I want to thank our panelists. Thanks to UNICEF USA for inviting me to moderate. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, Anya. On behalf of Concordia, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you again to UNICEF USA, Anya, and today's amazing panel for sharing their experiences and discussing such an important issue. We hope you found this conversation to be insightful. We were thrilled to have you watch. Thank you again, and have a great day.